My name is Angie, and this is the story I wasn't supposed to find.
And I'm our sister, Cindy. We started this podcast with one name, Stella Smith, our great-grandmother, a woman who gave up 2 daughters, disappeared from history, and left behind almost nothing.
No photos, no grave, no explanation, just a blank space where a person should have been.
Until a DNA test changed everything. Turns out, Stella Smith wasn't even her real name.
Her name was Estrella Suarez. She came to America from Spain as a child. She married twice, left 2 families, and somehow managed to vanish not once, but twice from history.
In season 1, we found Estrella's beginnings in America. We found family we didn't know existed. We sat across a table from cousins who'd been looking for the same woman we had from the other direction. And we thought we were closing a chapter.
We were wrong.
Because season 2 is where things get even more complicated and even more personal. New relatives surface, new documents turn up, and some of the answers we finally found led to questions we'd never thought to ask.
This is Buried Threads, a podcast about family secrets, silence, reinvention, and what happens when the past refuses to stay buried.
If you're just joining us on Buried Threads, welcome. And we strongly recommend going back to season 1 before you go much further with season 2. That's where we lay out the full story of our search, how we found our great-grandmother's name, how we connected with Paul, how we learned she was a Spanish immigrant who had reinvented herself more than once. All of that is there episode by episode, and we think it's worth your time. But here's where season 2 picks up, and it moves pretty fast. When we closed out season 1, we had traced Estrella Suarez, our great-grandmother, who had also gone by Stella Smith and Stella DeBoard, as far as 1937. Her last confirmed location was a residence in Springfield, Illinois, where she worked as a oven maid. After that, she disappeared again.
We also had one outstanding DNA match that we hadn't been able to connect with yet. A man named Ryan Walters in Los Angeles. The DNA told us he was a close match, but his profile was locked. He wasn't responding to his messages, and we were stuck.
So we put out a public plea. Angie sent lots and lots of emails and messages. And eventually, Ryan did get back to us. He opened his family tree on Ancestry, and what we saw there really has changed everything.
The Spanish ancestry in Ryan's DNA was coming through his mother. Her name is Terry, and Terry's father was a man named Edward Nelson. Edward was born to a woman named Wilma Estelle Nelson. You notice that? Estelle. A woman who, as we would come to understand, had been keeping secrets her entire life.
Wilma Estelle Nelson was Estrella, our great-grandmother. She had married a man named William Edward Nelson in May of 1937, closing the gap between her last record in Springfield as Stella DeBoard and the start of a new life with a new name and a new town. And she and William had 2 children together, a daughter named Frances, who they called Franny, and a son named Edward.
By all accounts, they were a quiet family, a modest family, but a family that stayed together. William died in 1966. Estrella, Wilma, eventually moved closer to Edward's family, and she passed away in 1981.
So that means we finally know where she's buried. After nearly a century, we have found her.
We found her. It's hard to believe. And then we met Terry. She is Edward's daughter, Estrella's granddaughter, and she's our mom's first cousin. We met with Terry just days after she buried her own father, Edward, who passed away in December of 2025. Think about that. Estrella's youngest child had just passed away a few weeks before we made these connections in December. She was gracious and generous with her time, and she gave us a picture of Wilma, of Estrella, that we hadn't had before. A woman who was private, who was complicated, who kept her past tightly locked, even from her own children. Edward had spent years quietly investigating his mother's secrets. He noted things that didn't add up, and he went to Springfield looking for records that she had hinted at. He died without the answers he was looking for.
And as secretive as Estrella was, her children, her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren, we are all people who do not let secrets lay buried, right? We are not letting them stay buried. So last week, we dropped what we called a bomb. It was a bomb for us in the story.
So we want to revisit what we shared at the close of last week's episode because it deserves more than just a closing line. When Estrella married William Nelson in 1937, they settled in a town in West Central Illinois. They raised their children there. They built a life there. William lived there until he died in 1966. And Estrella, Wilma, called that place home for the better part of 3 decades.
And that town was Macomb, Illinois.
Now, here's what you need to know about Macomb and about our grandmother, Marie Christine.
So Marie Christine DeBoard was born in January of 1928 to Estrella, Stella, and Christopher. She was put in foster care, eventually adopted by a couple named Noah and Nellie Hickman. Her name was changed to Norma Jean Hickman. And for the purposes of this podcast, we do refer to her as Marie Christine, but to the world and to herself for many years, she was Norma Jean.
The Hickmans had a farm outside of Macomb. They were established there. They were church-going, community-minded people. In fact, they were founding members of the Methodist Church there.
Right. Noah died in 1937 when Marie Christine was 9 years old. And after his death, Nellie sold the farm. She and her mother, Nanny, and Marie Christine moved off of that land and into the town of Macomb. And they lived there together. Marie Christine, who would become our grandmother, would remain in or just outside of Macomb for the rest of her life, and she is buried there.
Marie Christine moved into Macomb in 1937. Estrella moved into Macomb in 1937.
Yeah. The same year, the same town, which is insane, right? That's crazy, crazy business.
Marie Christine spent her entire adult life wondering about her birth mother. She actually hired a private investigator. She and her husband, Frank, even went to the estate in Springfield where Estrella had last been documented and knocked on the door, hoping that someone there might tell them something, and they found nothing. The trail was cold.
You know, that also reminds me, Angie, of Edward going to Springfield looking for clues to the secrets his mom was keeping, when in reality, the biggest secret was right there in Macomb. Yeah, Estrella wasn't in Springfield anymore. She was in Macomb and literally across town. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit.
Can I clap something in?
Yes, absolutely, Mom.
Well, are you going to mention that Edward was a police officer?
He was a police officer. That's right.
Yep.
County sheriff, correct?
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
So to put that in and think of his investigation, I think would be give it a little more pop even.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we don't know for sure if Estrella knew where Marie Christine was. There was a newspaper article that talked about the fact that they were moving into Macomb. So if she was watching any of those things, it's possible. It did become a public record. But we don't know. We don't know if she ever saw her or if she ever looked for her or if she ever passed her on the street without knowing. We may never know. But we know that they were there. They were in the same small town for years. And one of them spent those years wondering about the other.
That's right. And I looked it up, Angie, and Mom, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know this, but I think Macomb has always been a relatively comparatively small town. I think the population in 1937 was under 10,000 people. Does that sound right?
I think I wasn't there in 1937, but yes.
Claude said it was like 8,000 when I was talking to Claude about it. So,
yeah.
So yes, under 10.
It's a small place.
Yes. Interestingly enough, while we don't know for sure if Estrella knew that she was there, I wanted to see how close together they did actually live. And so I pulled up the census from 1940. And in 1940, Wilma was married to William, and they lived on Jefferson Street. And then I looked up the census for the Hickmans, who had now moved into Macomb, who also lived on Jefferson Street, 4 blocks away from each other. We don't know if they knew or ever interacted with each other. 4 blocks away. Wild business.
I mean, whether they knew or not, whether they were aware or not, they passed by each other on the street. They had to interact with each other in some way at some point, living that close to, I mean, just being in a small town in general, but being that close together, and even just in 1940 itself, like they would have had to, right?
Listen, I haven't been able to confirm the years to see if the years overlap, but she was the lunch lady at the local school. She cooked and served lunch at the local school. I don't know if those were the same years that she was there, but I'm working on confirming what the exact dates were.
The school that would have been right across the street from her house, which would have been 4 blocks away from where Marie Christine lived. So then you have to say, well, the likelihood that she attended that school is pretty good.
You would think. But again, I got to confirm all the years and the dates and make sure everything lines up.
Yeah. And that was the same school where William worked as a janitor. But again, talking about timeline, we know that he retired from a pottery company or a ceramics company, or I can't remember. It's like hemping company. They made some pottery. So I don't know what year he retired and then started working as a janitor. So same thing, but just the fact that it's even possible that she went to that school where they worked is crazy.
Well, what's wild to me is, I searched everywhere all these years when I didn't have any clues. I searched everywhere from Spain to California and everywhere in between, casting this wide net of where could this be. In actuality, it's getting very small. It's getting down to the same town, down to like 4 blocks from each other. That's just wild.
Well, we have to pause for a second because we have somebody else with us today and we need to introduce her. So Angie, do you want to go ahead and introduce our mom?
Yes. So joining us today is someone who has been on this journey with us from the very beginning. In fact, it's the person who asked me to first start looking into this. And it's our mom, Chris. Chris is the daughter of Marie Christine. By the way, her name is Marie Christine. So the original Marie Christine, grandma, her name was changed to Norma Jean in the adoption. But then when she had a daughter, she named that child, our mom, Marie Christine, which I think is pretty cool.
Mom, have you always gone by Chris?
Well, back in the olden days, when you were in school, you always had to go by your first name. So it was Marie at school. But my parents called me Chris.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, she grew up in this rural area just outside of Macomb, Illinois, in a converted one-room schoolhouse that her parents, Marie Christine and Frank, turned into their home. She knew her mother as Norma Jean, and she knew her grandmother's story only in pieces: the name Stella Smith, the adoption, and the blank space.
Mom, thanks for being willing to come on here and do this with us, to have this conversation with us today, and really for the whole wild ride that this has been. It's been a lot. So let's start with, why don't you tell us anything you want to tell us about your mom, Norma Jean, Marie Christine? What stands out when you think about her story or who she was?
Well, Mom was very quiet and reserved, but my dad was very overbearing. And so I think she just started to pull it inside, because whether he thought he was a funny man and he would just squash you. And so I think that's kind of what she did. But when I look back at pictures of Mom, there were photo albums of her as a child, which is unusual because people didn't have cameras. And so I asked her once if her family had money, and she had said they had been very comfortable at one point. And so I think of this woman who was raised by people who founded the Methodist Church. I know there was a piano in the house from pictures. She probably knew how to play the piano, all of these things. And then she marries the bad boy from the other side of the tracks. My dad was a drinker. He cussed, he smoked, he did all those kind of things. He was, again, like I said, he thought he was funny, but he was very overbearing. So I think that over time, she just began to withdraw and withdraw more, probably looking at him thinking, why did I marry you? Kind of thing. The things that were attractive to her when she was, getting married probably faded over the years. But she didn't talk about her family. She didn't talk about growing up. She didn't talk about any of those things. The things that I learned about her as a child, I learned when she was on her deathbed, when I was asking her questions. But I think part of that was, Dad shared with me that they went to Springfield looking for her mom. They tried, and it was almost like, okay, we tried, we couldn't find her. It's over. It's done. And I also think he felt that her adopted parents judged him. So he didn't use very kind language when he referred to them. So I think that she just didn't talk about them because that would set him off. And so it was just an unusual thing that she did not talk about herself, did not talk about her family, like I said, until she was on her deathbed and I was asking questions.
There was a sense of sadness about her, you told us before. Did you feel that as a child, or is that something you understood better now looking back?
I sensed it as a child, but like all child who are egocentric, it's like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? But then as an adult, looking back, I certainly do understand it.
Yeah.
When did you know that your mom had been adopted?
I always knew. So I don't know. I don't know exactly when or if it was related to me. I always knew I was named the name that she had been given.
What did you know? I mean, so you knew that your name was the name she was her birth name. So what else did you know? Did you know her mom's name, or did you know she knew her mom's name?
Knew nothing of those things. And then, of course, we found all those things in the bank box after Mom was dead. And we found the name Stella Smith and Christopher DeBoer, those things. But before then, I didn't know that.
Looking back now, how do you think that your mom felt about being adopted, about having that missing piece in her story?
I always felt that she wondered, where her mom was and why she was adopted. But again, she didn't talk about it much because then Dad would jump in and shut it down.
Do you think that was his way of dealing with like being uncomfortable, jumping in? Like that was just his way of, he's uncomfortable, so he just kind of, I don't know, makes a joke or whatever.
He can't fix it.
He can't fix it. I think that's the big thing. And, like he would always say, we tried and couldn't do it. And so it was like, then there was the finality to what he was saying, that it was over for him. It definitely was not over for her.
Well, and given the 25 years of research, like it's fair for him to, like, it was a big hill to climb, right? It's not like I'm blaming him. He could, you gave up early, sucker, right? Like that's not the story at all. But at the same time, there's that emotional support he wasn't providing, like to be able to say, I'm sorry, and still give it place to breathe with her. Like that's the part that maybe she didn't receive.
Right.
And we did notice when we were looking at documents, Mom, I saw the birth record that she obtained. That's her actual birth record that has Stella and Christopher on it. The date on that is 1983. So she must have continued to go down whatever avenue she could to find information. But like Angie said, I mean, we weren't able to find out a whole lot until a DNA test. I mean, that's really what changed the game for us. Plus all these ancestry, sites and stuff like that. So yeah, what would he have done at that point? There probably wasn't anything.
Well, unless I just had this thought, like that record was sealed. How did she get that? How'd she get that birth record?
I have no idea. And the reason I have no idea is because we didn't find those after she was dead. But she had been collecting those things and put them in a bank safe deposit box. Dad didn't even know about them. He said to me after she was gone, there's a bank box. Let's go see what's in it. And he looked at it, and I won't say what he called it, but he was going to throw it away. And I asked him if I could have it.
Oh, wow.
And then I gave that all to Angie. So she kept all that secret from him. Interesting. Her mother was a woman of secrets, and my mom became a woman of secrets.
Yeah. Those darn epigenetics at play. Yeah. No, secrets are about pain. You're right. So after Grandma passed in 2003, I believe, you asked Angie, hey, why don't you see what you could find? Why don't you, look into this? What was it like for you when she started that? Before the DNA search, before that, what was it like for you as she explored and tried to find out what she could in that time?
Well, I had the easy job because I just sat back and waited for her to report to me what she found out. But it was interesting. It was interesting, and I was always amazed at what she did come up with. But I don't know that I thought we'd ever find her either.
Yeah. I was going to ask that. Did you ever think we'd actually find her?
I think I hoped, but it just was such an insurmountable task. And of course, technology has made so much more available and has certainly speeded up the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But you think about what we found and we understand why it took so long. Angie and I have said this before, but I am pretty sure that without DNA, we never would have made these connections ever. We
Never.
wouldn't even have known where to look for this stuff.
Right.
DNA does not lie, and it does not keep secrets.
That's right.
Correct.
Oh no.
Correct.
It bears all. That's what we say. I mean, in terms of family genealogy, I highly recommend, going the DNA route for people, but also they need to be prepared for what they might unintentionally discover. You just need to be you can't be really emotionally prepared, but try to prepare yourself to find out stuff you never thought you'd learn or didn't even necessarily want to know.
Right.
We have said repeatedly to ourselves that DNA search is not for the faint of heart.
Correct.
So we gifted you a DNA test. What did you think when we gave that to you?
Yes. Well, if you remember, you guys did ask me first. And at first I was like, I don't know. But then, then I agreed. And then it was kind of exciting. Okay, let's see what it finds, And we learned a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, first of all, like 20-something% Spanish, right?
Exactly. Which didn't surprise me because my mom did have the olive skin and the black hair. I take after my dad, very fair skinned. I don't look Spanish at all. My brother did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a little bit more olive tone.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first big revelation, before we found anything about anything, just the Spanish. And that was just mind blowing.
Mm-hmm. It's like, where did that come from?
Right. Exactly. So we've talked about the DNA matches. We've learned about Paul. We finally connected with Ryan and Terry. But Ryan was an anomaly that Angie had to spend some time figuring out. It isn't that he's related to you any differently. Angie could tell by the centimorgans in common that he descended from another child of Estrella. That was good, but there was an anomaly in his DNA that we needed to figure out what was causing that. So Angie, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
We talked before, the centimorgans that he had were actually slightly more than Paul, so that would make it look like he was another first cousin with mom. But the problem is he's only 30, and that my mind just didn't make sense. Well, now that we know the whole family, he's actually not first cousins with mom. He's actually first cousin once removed. Terry's first cousin. And if you look at Terry, her DNA is exactly where you would expect it to be, first cousin. So then the question is, well, why is Ryan's more? Like Terry should be here and then Ryan should be under it. It should be less. Why is it more? And then what I finally figured out, and actually once I saw this, it all bore out because there was another anomaly that I never gave a whole lot of thought to, but it ended up being important. When I look at the DNA matches in the cluster, there were a few of the DNA matches that were unique to Ryan that were not with Paul, and they were paternal and not maternal. And at first I just, they weren't real close matches, so I didn't really worry about that big of a deal. But that actually became part of the answer to the question. What it means is that Edward and your father, Frank, in their distant, somewhere back in their distant DNA, that they have some shared DNA together. And it's not a lot, right? And it makes sense because they're both from Macomb. They were both in Macomb their entire life. But it's just enough that was like added to the DNA that's from Estrella. And so then the two of those together is what gave it the slightly elevated amount. So, happens in a small town, but made a whole lot more sense than what I was originally thinking when I saw that.
Right.
Yeah. And it is likely in a small town.
Well, you've been learning alongside us, Christopher, and then Stella, and then Estrella, and then Paul, and then Ryan, and then Terry. So what's it like to be at this point in the search, knowing what you now know?
I think it's exciting and also a little settling, starting to get the end of the story, right? But when we met with Paul and his siblings and his wife, they were such warm, friendly people, because you don't know what you're going to get into when you just go meet strangers somewhere. but they were just so warm and
Right.
so welcoming. And then, Paul and I look alike and see the family resemblance in us. And that was, it's like,
Sure
wow,
do.
And then when Terry comes on the scene and, we meet, and Paul and his wife and Terry and the three of us were all there. It was almost surreal. Like, I can't believe, this. It also fits the timeline. What Paul is 84, 87, somewhere in there, in his 80s. I'm 71 and Terry's in her 60s, so, but again, in Terry, we found another warm, friendly reception and embracing of family. So I thought I know not everybody has that experience, but we've been very fortunate too.
Yeah. When I saw Paul the second time, it was just like seeing family. Like, and that was the feeling that I just walked away from. I was like, wow, this is just wild. And, you have a relatively small nuclear family. And, much of your family has passed as well, your mom, your dad, and your brother. And, not a lot of extended cousins and that kind of thing. So kind of interesting that you have now expanded that and now you have a lot more family than you knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, actually, I did have cousins on my dad's side, and we would get together. We would all meet together at my dad's mom's house for Sunday dinner. And I had a cousin who was just a year
Yeah.
older than me, who was like a friend. But a lot of my cousins have passed away as well.
Yeah. So what do you think that your mom would think about all of this? Everything we've uncovered and the families that you found and where Estrella ended up four blocks away from her as a child. What would she think about all that?
I think it would answer a lot of the questions, but I think it would have raised more questions. Like, how could you have lived 4 blocks away from me and we never interacted? Again, I think that would have just made her feel more rejected, knowing that. Or how could you have worked at my school?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Right.
And why did you stay with that family when you gave us up? So it would have answered questions, but would have opened more questions for her. And when someone's already hurting, then those questions just bring about more hurt instead of resolution.
Yeah. Yeah. But sometimes, just even though it is hard stuff, sometimes when it brings closure.
Right. And the fact that she always longed for a sister, because I don't think she knew about her sister until she got that divorce decree. And then she was very confused because it refers to Florence in the divorce, but it does not mention her. So then she did question whether was that her name? Was that Florence or what? Yeah. So to know that, yes, there was a Florence who was your sister, and there were others. I mean, and then Terry, suddenly this family would have opened up of people, so she wouldn't have felt so alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So has your view of your mom changed as we've been uncovering this story?
Well, some of it has changed as I've grown up, and part of the work that we've all done in our lives, working often with marginalized people and seeing pain that people experience, certainly brings a much more compassionate look at her than I had as a kid or as a teenager or even a young adult.
Yeah.
To understand that she was in pain and that many of the behaviors were rooted in that pain.
Has your understanding of Estrella changed how you see your mom?
That's a good question. I think so, because again, we talked in one of the other podcasts, you talked about the sticky notes, that shape people. And I think I see some of those in Mom that were passed down from Stella. But I think the other thing it's taught me is that generational patterns can be changed. They can be broken and they can be improved.
So we do have big news on this front. You know that we have been working to try to find her adoption records. And, once we learned that she was not adopted till she was 6, we realized that those adoption records are actually going to hold a lot of information because they're going to hold information from, birth or young infancy all the way until she's 6 years old. And you remember, of course, that we had the judge sign to unseal those records in Sangamon County, only to find out that the records weren't there. And so we didn't know where they were. And so because you were with me, we tried going in Knox County. I will just let sleeping dogs lie with regards to how Knox County interacted with us. But you recall that in the stuff that your mom had in the safe deposit box, there was a newspaper article just announcing the adoption. And so it had the name of the judge and it had the name of the lawyer and it had her name before and after. Well, Cindy posted that with Buried Threads, with part of the documents as we're sharing. And so an internet sleuther did what internet sleuthers do and did some finger keyboarding research and told us that the judge that completed the adoption, he was practicing in McDonough County. And so we knew then for certain that McDonough County is where the adoption records are. And so with that information, I very quickly called the county clerk's office and asked for those records to be released. And they said they would look into it and they would get back to me. And they called me back the next morning at like 8:00 in the morning. And they shared that the records were there, but they were impounded. And I'd never heard impounded used. And so I did a little research on that. It's basically sealed, but there's a legal distinction. It's sealed at a higher level. And so basically only a judge's order can release it. And so I spent the better part of a day trying to figure out how to get this. How do we process getting this unsealed? And so basically what I had to do is I had to file a motion in the McDonough County Court, which looks at first glance, it looks like I'm suing the county clerk, though I'm not, obviously. But basically it's asking a judge to issue a declaratory judgment that will release all of these records. It was a little expensive, but that's okay. That's the way Illinois government works. But I got all those things done, paid all those things. And then I received a call back within an hour that they've accepted our case and then we needed to make a hearing. So we have a hearing in about a week from Tuesday, where we're going to be going before the judge and asking him to release these records. And so I'm really super excited because I think this is going to open up a lot of information for us and provide a lot of details. And Cindy and Jason are both going to, the hearing is going to be by Zoom. And so Cindy and Jason are both going to be there. We'd love for you to be present also as well, just to be able to kind of give this show of support to the judge as we make this request.
Yes.
Sure. Sounds good. Do you have a time for this?
It's crazy that we're going to court over this. We're going to a hearing over this.
I know.
That's insane.
We do have a time at like 11:00 in the morning. I'll send you the calendar invite.
Okay.
And and it's so our imaginations have run wild.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, here's my thoughts. Again, I try to always quantify. This is an opinion statement. The records are going to tell us. Cindy said this well. The records are going to tell us, they're going to answer many of our questions, and they're going to answer questions we didn't even know we had because there's going to be more information than we probably think in there. But between the fact that the records were impounded, that means something happened that caused this to be escalated to a different level that this was done. And also the fact that she moved four blocks away from grandma when she was a child. To us, that does not sound like someone who abandoned her child. It sounds like someone who had their child taken away from them. And so that's which there's lots of things. What's the reason why? And we have some speculation, but we don't know. We'll see what all those things tell us. But it does reframe the story from one of abandonment. I didn't want you. Right? I didn't stay with this family because I didn't want this family, but more of this family was taken from me. And another interesting thought that I had is, if you think about it, if that's true, if the child was taken away against her will, right? It was not a voluntary thing. There is a legal process to challenge that, right? To be able to to fight that, except that she would probably not be able to do that because she was living under a false identity. For her to go into court and try to defend herself, she would have been calling attention to the fact that she was not Stella Smith DeBoard.
And that she was a bigamist.
So it creates an interesting little puzzle. And that she was a bigamist, which, by the way, is a felony, which would mean, for sure jail time.
In the 30s, it was. Yeah. Right.
100%. Yep.
Right.
So it really does give a lot of questions and reframes what we think we know.
Well, that will be interesting. Cindy, when you talked about what this meant to my mom, we talked before about, did mom have some level of attachment issues? Not a disorder, not a full-blown disorder, but attachment issues. And you think about, where was she those first 6 years? Was she in an orphanage?
6 years is a long time.
And was she in someone's care and then removed to someone else's care? Because I remember asking her when she was on her deathbed if she'd been happy when she was a child. And she said, yes, I was happy until my dad died. So obviously she was attached then to him, but was that like the final blow for her, as far as being able to attach and deeply attach with people, which could explain why she seems so aloof, as an adult.
Well, and also interesting, that's the way that Terry described her as a grandmother, that Estrella was very aloof and distant, and so you see that pattern coming down.
Of course, she had secrets.
She did have secrets. She had a lot of secrets. And honestly, she kept them under wraps pretty well. So props to her. That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
This episode has given us a lot to think about. The idea that Estrella and Marie Christine, mother and daughter, lived for years in the same town, unknown to each other, is not something we can tidy up or resolve. It just is.
But there's still a lot we don't know. We're still working to understand the circumstances that led to Florence and Marie entering foster care, when, exactly, and why. We'd like to know more about Estrella's earliest years before she arrived in the United States. And Christopher's story still has unresolved threads. Where did he go after 1948, and where is he buried? We haven't forgotten any of it.
But today felt like something we needed to do before we kept pulling those threads. Today was for our mom and for hers.
We've talked throughout this search about Estrella as a woman who left, who walked away from Emilio and Mary Rose, from Christopher and from two daughters, who reinvented herself not once but several times. And we've tried from the beginning to hold that story without judgment, because judgment doesn't help us to understand.
But we've always believed that a woman who leaves her children behind more than once isn't doing so without a reason, that something shaped her. She was carrying something we haven't yet named.
And next week, we think we found it.
Recently, while viewing artifacts and documents from the Taylor Springs years, we came across something we had either missed or didn't fully understand the first time, something that changes the picture of Estrella's childhood in a significant way.
It begins with a death certificate, a baby girl named Bernardina, the first child of Manuel and Rosa, who died in 1917. She was about 16 months old. Estrella was 10 or 11 years old, and the details of what happened to that little girl, the way that she suffered and died, are difficult to read.
And then there's baby Joe, Mary Rose's twin, Estrella's first child, who died at birth in 1923. We now know more about the circumstances of that delivery than we did before, and they're not easy either.
2 losses, both violent in their own way, both witnessed or experienced by Estrella before she was 17 years old. We're going to talk about what those losses may have meant, the grief, the trauma, and what science now tells us about how that kind of early loss can shape a person's ability to stay close to people that they love.
We're not trying to excuse the choices Estrella made. We are trying to understand the woman who made them. And next week, we think we get a little closer to that.
Until then, keep pulling the thread.
Thanks for listening. If you're walking your own search through DNA, silence, or a name you can't quite place, you're not alone.
If you want to go deeper on this story, you can find us on Substack at buriedthreads.substack.com. That's where we release every episode, along with documents, photos, and the kind of details that don't always make it into the audio.
You can also find and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you haven't yet, subscribing or leaving a review makes a real difference in helping other people find us.
For more photos, recap videos, polls, and the occasionally chaotic behind-the-scenes moments, find us on Facebook and Instagram. We're at Buried Threads.
And if something we've shared has stirred something in your own family story, we really do want to hear it. Reach out. You might be surprised where a single thread leads.
Until next time, keep pulling the thread.
Just knowing she existed. She was real. She had an